This week, a federal judge slammed President Trump, his lawyers, and the Justice Department over the president's lawsuit against the Internal Revenue Service. The judge says the president's lawsuit over his leaked tax returns was filed for a, quote, improper purpose. She stopped short of voiding the deal, which guarantees the president and his affiliated companies immunity from tax audits and investigations. It also established a $1.7 billion so-called anti-weaponization fund, but the Trump administration says it has abandoned that after facing backlash. Now, the president's legal team responded by writing, quote, the IRS wrongly allowed a rogue politically motivated employee to leak private and confidential information. President Trump continues to hold those who wrong America and Americans accountable. CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson joins me to answer some constitutional questions about this case. So this has obviously come up a lot in Todd Blanche's confirmation hearing before a committee, before he goes to the full Senate. Has a president ever sued a federal agency?
Not that I know of, and not this way. And this is the first question is so important because it really leads us to why this is a who decides question.
All right, guys, Dr. John is here. So this is happening right now. The Justice Department is compiling a formal list of judges it considers out of line and sending it to Congress, a direct executive assault on judicial independence. The move, unprecedented in modern American history, signals a fundamental breakdown in the separation of powers. At the exact same moment, over in the House of Representatives, people are throwing around brand new impeachment resolutions against Trump. And get this, there's also a resolution trying to erase his old impeachments like they never even happened. Like you can just press a delete button on history and make it all disappear. Come on, you cannot make this stuff up. This is the kind of storyline that would get rejected by a Hollywood studio for being too unrealistic, too over the top, too much of a stretch for audiences to believe.
Federal judges get to decide when there is a true case or controversy. You cannot walk into the federal courthouse doors unless there is a conflict between the plaintiff and the defendant. And you asked me, has the president ever sued a federal agency before? And I think the answer is not that I know of, and specifically not this way. What happened? We have President Trump as a taxpayer suing the IRS, which is obviously an agency under the executive branch, and then the Department of Justice, which is clearly under the executive branch, defending that suit. Already we have a problem because we have private plaintiff Trump who is suing. Again, the IRS and the Department of Justice is defending, and he is obviously as president, head of those particular agencies. But then even more so, what we have here is the judge saying, you just used me for a ruse. There was never really a true conflict. You filed this suit because you wanted me as a judge to bless it. This was settled before.
And yet this is real. This is actually happening. The ground beneath Washington is shifting in ways that most people don't even realize. And the implications of all of this are going to echo for decades, regardless of who ends up winning these fights. So here's the thing that's blowing everyone's mind right now. The detail that should have been front page news everywhere, but somehow slipped through the cracks. Back in February this year, the Justice Department quietly reached out to federal prosecutors across the country and asked them to send in what they called the most egregious examples of judges blocking Trump's agenda. Egregious. That's their word, not mine. They wanted this list so Congress could possibly take action against these judges. Think about that for a second. The executive branch, Trump's own DOJ, is building a paper trail against the judicial branch.
The government even answered, and there was never a conflict. You use these federal courthouse doors for improper purposes, and that was the crux of the judge's reasoning here.
Jessica, I've interviewed you enough times to know that you might have a little bug in your throat. So we're killing your mic if you want to clear that really quickly, because we do have more to get to. And I'm actually going to see if our director can pull up the next graphic. Does this ruling invalidate his blanket immunity?
First of all, thank you for knowing me well. Second, maybe not. So this decision was all about the settlement fund, but I think there's a very good argument to be made that this decision also affects all other parts of the settlement. So the decision, meaning the settlement, had a few big parts. One of them was we're creating this $1.8 billion fund, but it wasn't for President Trump. There was always a mismatch between who sued versus what the settlement actually gave. The settlement gave potential claimants who said, I'm the victim of government weaponization, the ability to get money. But as we talked about, there were never factors to determine how you get that money. Another part of the settlement, Lindsay, as you know, was that President Trump and family members were essentially immune from audit. I think there's a good argument to be made that that part of the settlement is also no longer valid.
That's not a normal Tuesday in Washington. That's a full-on constitutional showdown, and most people don't even know it's happening. It's the kind of quiet administrative move that historians will point to decades from now as the moment something fundamental shifted. And it gets even messier. While DOJ is out there hunting for judges to put on a watch list, Congress is dealing with its own fireworks. A brand new impeachment resolution against Trump, House Resolution 1155, got introduced back in April. That's a fresh attempt to hold the president accountable, introduced by members who clearly think his actions, including this judiciary fight, cross a serious line. Then, just a few weeks later, another resolution popped up. This one trying to wipe out Trump's 2 previous impeachments completely, like a delete button for history. So on one side, you've got people trying to impeach him again, and on the other side, you've got allies trying to erase the impeachments he already got.
Right, a federal judge says the Department of Justice and attorneys for President Trump misused the court in his civil lawsuit against the Internal Revenue Service. In her decision, Judge Kathleen Williams wrote, quote, "This matter was brought for an improper purpose, and the plaintiffs acted in bad faith." The president's legal team slammed that decision, writing in part, "The IRS wrongly allowed a rogue, politically motivated employee to leak private and confidential information." Their statement goes on to read, "President Trump continues to hold those who wrong America and Americans accountable." So what's going on here? CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman has been looking through all of this and joins us now in studio to discuss. Katrina, good morning and welcome. What is the judge's reasoning on her scathing ruling here against the president and his lawyers?
Good morning, Errol. Yes, this was truly a scathing ruling to read. And basically what she says is this wasn't a real lawsuit. She says it was essentially a sham, that there were no adversarial parties. In a lawsuit, you want 2 sides with actual opposing views. And she outlines how basically President Trump was just...
Are you kidding me? It's like watching 2 teams play completely different games on the same field, each one convinced they're the ones who understand the rules. This is wild because it's not just some side story buried on page 10 of the news. This is Trump versus the courts. This is the presidency testing how far it can push against judges who were supposed to be independent, who were supposed to be a check on executive power. And it's happening at the exact same time Congress is fighting over impeachment, past and present. If you feel like the ground is shifting under Washington right now, you're not wrong. Something genuinely significant is happening. And the fact that most people aren't talking about it doesn't make it less important. It makes it more important to pay attention. Let's slow down for a second and actually get into what's going on, because this story is way bigger than the headline.
in control of every party involved in this case. So she says there was no actual adversarial process here, and that really this was just brought to essentially get an official legal stamp from the court to make it seem like this had been legitimate and that this settlement was gotten in a way that was actually approved by our judicial system. She says none of that's true. And so as a result, she essentially just says that this cannot go forward.
And what are the consequences of the judge looking into the available evidence and making this type of ruling?
I mean, the administration has said that they're not moving forward with the settlement, so it's unclear whether it actually voids anything. But she says that President Trump, his sons, they can't actually refer to this settlement if they're audited later. And most immediately, Errol, there are potential consequences for attorneys here. Mm-hmm. She refers President Trump's attorney for possible disciplinary action. There's another one of his attorneys who was involved. She says he can't try to work in Florida for the next year. And even more importantly, when it comes to Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, right, she wants this order sent to the New York State Bar, which is where Blanche is barred, and the same for...
Most people hear DOJ fights judges and think, okay, whatever, lawyers arguing again. But no, this is different. This is the Justice Department under Trump reaching out to prosecutors and basically asking them to flag the worst examples of judges ruling against Trump's policies so that list can go straight to Congress. This should have been front page news everywhere. Instead, it kind of slipped by. And that's exactly why we're covering it now with the attention it deserves. Here's why this matters so much. Judges in this country are supposed to be independent. That's the whole point. They're not supposed to answer to the president. They're not supposed to be scared of getting reported to Congress for ruling the wrong way. That's like the entire foundation of the American legal system. 3 branches, checks and balances, nobody bosses around anybody else. But when the DOJ starts building files on judges specifically because those judges ruled against the administration, that's not checks and balances anymore. That's pressure. That's intimidation, whether they admit it or not. And here's the part that really gets me. DOJ isn't even hiding while they're doing this. They came right out and said they were responding to what they call unprecedented judicial activism. Unprecedented. That's a huge word to throw around. Basically, they're saying judges are being wild and out of control, blocking things left and right, and somebody needs to do something about it. But here's the thing. Judges block presidential actions all the time. That's literally their job when they think something crosses a legal line. It happened under Biden. It happened under Obama. It happened during Trump's first term too. So calling it unprecedented is a stretch, and that's where a lot of people are getting confused. This is where most people misunderstand the story. And I really want you to get this part. A lot of viral videos and hot takes make it sound like Trump is single-handedly declaring war on the entire judiciary, like tanks are rolling up to courthouses or something crazy like that. That's not what's happening. What is actually happening is slower and more calculated. And honestly, that makes it scarier in a way. DOJ collecting a list, Congress reviewing it, that's a process that's building a case brick by brick to justify bigger action down the road. Maybe stripping judges of certain powers. Maybe pushing for impeachment of specific judges. Maybe just creating a chilling effect where judges think twice before ruling against the administration. Can you believe this is how it works? Slow, quiet, paperwork-style pressure instead of a dramatic showdown. It's the kind of bureaucratic warfare that doesn't make for exciting headlines, but has enormous consequences for the future of American democracy. Now, let's flip over to the impeachment side of this story, because it connects directly to everything we just talked about. House Resolution 1155 got introduced on April 6th this year. That's a fresh impeachment resolution against Trump, introduced by members who clearly think his actions, including this judiciary fight, cross a serious line. Now, resolutions like this get introduced a lot, and most of them never go anywhere. They don't have the votes. Everybody kind of knows that going in. But the fact that they keep getting introduced over and over tells you something about how divided Congress really is and how normalized the word impeachment has become in everyday politics. It's no longer this rare, sacred constitutional tool. It's become just another political talking point, just another weapon in the partisan arsenal. But here's the part that really flips the story on its head. Just over 2 weeks after that impeachment resolution, on April 23rd, another resolution shows up, House Resolution 1211. And this one is doing the exact opposite. This one wants to expunge, meaning erase, Trump's 2 previous impeachments, the 2019 one and the 2021 one, like they never happened. Wipe them clean off the record. So think about the timing here. One group in Congress wants a brand new impeachment. Another group wants the old ones deleted, like some kind of do-over button. This is wild. This isn't just politics as usual. This is a full-blown tug of war over Trump's legacy happening in real time, on paper, in the House of Representatives. And look, I get why this confuses people. It seems contradictory, right? How can Congress be trying to impeach Trump again while also trying to erase his old impeachments? But actually, it makes total sense once you see it for what it really is. It's not really about the legal outcome. It's about controlling the story. It's about who gets to write history. If you're trying to protect Trump's image and legacy, wiping the impeachments feels like a win. If you're trying to hold him accountable, a new impeachment resolution feels like justice finally catching up. Both sides are playing the exact same game, using impeachment as a political weapon instead of the serious constitutional tool it's supposed to be. And in the process, they're both eroding the meaning of impeachment itself. Let's connect the dots here, because this is the part most coverage completely misses. You've got DOJ quietly building a case against judges, you've got new impeachment pushes against Trump, and you've got a competing push to erase his past impeachments. These aren't three separate stories, they're one big story about power. Who controls the courts? Who controls the historical record? Who gets punished and who gets protected? And all of it is happening while regular people are just trying to go about their lives, having no idea how much is shifting underneath them. There's also a Reuters piece from June 11th that a lot of people miss, reporting that Trump and his allies are actively working on a plan to void his impeachments. Not just talking about it casually, actually working on a plan that lines up perfectly with House Resolution 1211, trying to expunge them. So this isn't some random one-off resolution from a random House member. This looks like part of a bigger coordinated push. And when you put that next to DOJ going after judges at the same time, you start to see the real picture. It's not judges versus Trump in isolation. It's Trump trying to reshape the entire system that's supposed to hold him accountable, the courts, and the historical record of his own impeachments. Let's also talk about the phrase DOJ keeps repeating, because words matter here. A lot. Unprecedented judicial activism. Say that out loud a few times and notice how heavy it sounds. It's designed to sound heavy. It's designed to make you think something totally new and totally dangerous is happening in the courts. Something that's never happened before in American history. But come on, judges pushing back on presidents is basically as old as the presidency itself. Courts have blocked past presidents from both parties over the decades on all kinds of issues, including during Trump's first term. So when DOJ frames this as some brand new crisis, that's a framing choice, not a factual one. And framing choices are exactly how political messaging works, whether you're on the left or the right. It's about shaping how people perceive reality, not necessarily about describing reality accurately. And here's something else worth sitting with for a second. When prosecutors are asked to gather the worst examples of judges ruling against an administration, that request itself changes behavior even before anything else happens. Think about it like this. If your boss asked you to keep a running list of every time a coworker disagreed with you, so you could hand that list to upper management, that coworker is going to feel it. They're going to think twice before speaking up next time. Judges are human too. If they know their rulings might end up on a list headed to Congress framed as egregious, that creates pressure whether or not anyone admits it out loud. This is wild because it doesn't require a single law to change. It just requires fear. And fear is one of the most effective political tools there is. It doesn't need legislation. It doesn't need court rulings. It just needs people to be afraid enough to change their behavior. And that's exactly what's happening right now. Now let's talk about why the impeachment side of this keeps happening over and over. Because a lot of people get tired of hearing about it and just tune it out. And honestly, I get it. But here's the thing. The more these resolutions get introduced without going anywhere, the more normal it becomes to just throw the word impeachment around like it's nothing. That's actually a problem for everybody, no matter who you support. Impeachment was designed as this rare, heavy, serious tool for actual high crimes. When it becomes a routine talking point every few months, it loses its weight. Future presidents, future Congresses, they're going to look back at this era and see impeachment resolutions treated almost like press releases. That's not a healthy trend for the system, period. It cheapens the constitutional process and makes it harder to take seriously when an actual serious violation occurs. Okay, so at this point you might be thinking, all right, this all sounds dramatic, but does any of it actually change anything right now today? And that's a fair question. So let's talk about what's real, what's just political noise, and what could actually happen next. There are really four big things happening at once, and each one matters on its own, but together they paint a much bigger picture. The DOJ judge list is real. This is documented, and it happened back in February. Prosecutors were asked to hand over their most egregious examples of judges blocking Trump policies so Congress could review them. This isn't some conspiracy theory floating around social media. This came straight from Reuters reporting based on actual DOJ activity. The reason this matters is because it's the first real documented step toward putting pressure on individual judges by name using the excuse of unprecedented judicial activism. Whether or not you think judges have been overreaching, using DOJ resources to build files meant for Congress crosses into dangerous territory. It blurs the line between disagreeing with a ruling and punishing the person who made it. The new impeachment resolution, House Resolution 1155, introduced April 6th, tells you that opposition to Trump hasn't cooled off even years into his second term. People pushing this resolution clearly believe there's enough there, whether it's the judiciary fight, other executive actions, or a combination of things, to justify another impeachment attempt. Now, realistically, resolutions like this rarely go anywhere without broader support. And you should know that going in so you don't get your hopes up or your fears up, depending on which side you're on. But the fact that it's happening again shows you how normalized impeachment has become as a political tool rather than the rare, serious last resort mechanism it was designed to be. House Resolution 1211, introduced April 23rd, trying to expunge Trump's 2019 and 2021 impeachments, is honestly one of the most fascinating parts of the whole story, and barely anyone's talking about it. Expunging an impeachment means officially wiping it from the record like it legally never happened. Think about how big of a deal that actually is. Impeachment is one of the most serious things Congress can do to a president, and now there's an active push to just erase that history completely. Combine that with the June 11 Reuters report about Trump and his allies actively working on a plan to void his impeachments, and you can see this isn't just some random bill. It looks like a coordinated effort to clean up the historical record before it becomes even more of a political liability down the road. And can we talk for a second about the timing of all this? Because timing tells you a lot in politics. February for the judge list. April for one impeachment resolution. April again, just weeks later, for the resolution to erase old impeachments. Then June for reporting on an active plan to void those impeachments. That's not scattered randomness. That's a pattern building over just a handful of months, one piece stacking on top of the last. When you see that kind of clustering, it usually means there's coordination happening somewhere behind closed doors, even if nobody's saying it out loud on camera. This whole situation is really Trump versus the institutions that are supposed to check his power. Not Trump versus Democrats specifically, not Trump versus one judge, not Trump versus one bill. It's bigger than that. It's the executive branch pressuring the judiciary. It's Congress fighting internally over whether to punish him further or erase his past punishments entirely. When you zoom out, you start to see the real story here. It isn't really about any single headline. It's about whether the checks and balances built into this country still function the way they're supposed to, or whether they're slowly being reshaped to fit whoever holds power at the moment. So why does this matter right now today to you watching this? It matters because this stuff shapes what kind of precedent gets set for future presidents on both sides, no matter who's in office. If a DOJ can build case files on judges who rule against the administration, that sets a template other administrations could use later against different judges for different reasons. If impeachments can just be expunged with enough political will, that changes what accountability even means going forward. This isn't some abstract legal debate for law professors. This actually shapes how much power future presidents have over the courts and over their own historical record. And here's who benefits from all this confusion. Honestly, politicians on every side benefit when the public is distracted, divided, and arguing about who's more outraged instead of paying attention to the actual mechanics of what's happening. When you're busy fighting online about whether Trump is a villain or a victim, you're not asking the more important question. Should any president from any party have this much leverage over the judges that are supposed to check him? Should any Congress be able to erase impeachment history just because they have the votes at a given moment? Those questions matter way more than the personalities involved. What comes next? Realistically, keep an eye on whether Congress actually acts on that DOJ list of judges. That's the next big domino. If specific judges get named publicly, or if there is a push to limit their authority or push for their removal, that's when this stops being a quiet paperwork process and becomes a full-blown constitutional crisis. No exaggeration. Also, keep watching House Resolution 1211 and whether that expungement effort picks up momentum, especially with reports that Trump's allies are actively working a plan behind the scenes. If that resolution gains real traction, it tells you a lot about how much political capital is being spent trying to clean up the past instead of dealing with the present. Look, at the end of the day, this story is a perfect example of why you can't just skim headlines and think you understand what's going on in Washington. On the surface, it looks like normal political chaos, impeachment talk, DOJ drama, the usual noise. But underneath it, there's a real structural fight happening over who controls the courts and who controls history. And so honestly, whichever side of this you're on, you should be paying attention, because whatever precedent gets set here doesn't just apply to Trump. It applies to whoever sits in that office next. Let's talk numbers for a second, because it helps to see how divided the country actually is on all this. Polling over the past couple years has shown Americans pretty much split right down the middle on whether Trump should be impeached at all for anything, with numbers shifting depending on whatever the latest controversy happens to be. That kind of even split is exactly why these resolutions keep getting introduced, but never really go anywhere in a Senate that would need a much bigger supermajority to actually convict. So here's the reality check. Introducing a resolution is easy. Any member of the House can do it basically whenever they want. Actually removing a sitting president requires a 2/3 vote in the Senate. And that bar has only been cleared 0 times in American history. 0. Not once ever for any president. So when you see headlines screaming about a new impeachment push, keep that number in your head. It's a real political statement, but it is nowhere close to an actual removal threat on its own. Same logic applies to that judge list DOJ built. Building a list and handing it to Congress doesn't automatically remove a judge from the bench either. Federal judges have what's called life tenure, meaning they serve basically for life unless they're impeached and remove themselves, which is incredibly rare and has only happened a small handful of times in the entire history of the country. So even if Congress reviews this list DOJ put together, actually doing something to punish a judge is its own massive uphill legal and political battle. That doesn't mean the list is harmless, though. Remember what we talked about, the chilling effect, the pressure, the message it sends. It just means we shouldn't panic like judges are getting dragged out of courtrooms tomorrow. This is a slow-moving fight, not an overnight one. So let's break it down one more time real quick before we wrap up, because I want this to stick with you. First, DOJ built a list of judges it considers egregious and sent the idea to Congress back in February. Second, a brand new impeachment resolution against Trump landed in April. Third, just weeks later, a totally separate resolution showed up trying to erase his past impeachments completely. And fourth, reporting from June shows Trump's own team actively working a plan behind the scenes to make that eraser happen. 4 different threads, all pulling at the same rope, all happening within just a few months of each other in 2026 alone. Why should you actually care about any of this beyond just being entertained by the chaos? Because whoever wins this fight, whether it's the judiciary holding its ground or the executive branch chipping away at it, that outcome becomes a new normal. It becomes a playbook, and playbooks get reused. Whatever precedent gets set with Trump's DOJ and Trump's impeachments doesn't stay locked to Trump. It becomes a tool sitting on the shelf for the next president and the one after that from either party. That's genuinely the biggest reason this story deserves way more attention than it's getting right now. So that's where things stand right now. DOJ building files on judges, new impeachment resolutions flying around Congress, a push to erase old impeachments at the same time, It's messy, it's tense, and it's honestly one of the most important stories nobody's fully connecting the dots on. Make sure you're subscribed and turn on notifications, because next time we're diving into what happens if that judge list actually goes public. And trust me, that's a story you do not want to miss. The pieces are all on the board. The players are making their moves. And the outcome of this fight is going to shape American politics for a generation, no matter which side you're on.